At some point you said, hey, I want to learn how to do this.
Oh yeah, that's later on in life.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, I thought, well, let's try it. It's gamble. It's a gamble. It's a challenge. So I got to give my wife Meryl a little credit. She remembered the recipe better than I did. And we got that going, and naturally had to show it off, and then finally got a half a barrel. I think I got a half a barrel of whiskey all the time. Put it down in the cornfield like, no, not yet now, after tasseling. And put it in about 8 rows. Because either a 2-row corn picker or somebody could hit it. And I'd turn that barrel every couple weeks. Or every week almost. It was a half a mile from home. But I walked after that to get that whiskey aged. You age whiskey by turning it into charcoal. So,
how did that product end up tasting?
That was a powerful stuff.
Those trucks are loud.
Oh, yeah.
We'll just wait till he goes there. Till he goes around the corner. Or straight, I guess.
Should we move in?
No, it's cool out here. I mean, we've never done anything out here. It's nice to have it.
Well, I'll gladly wait.
May never again either.
We gotta remember where we were at.
Okay.
But, I think Keith, Scott will vouch for me. That first whiskey that used to come out 130 proof, then you knew something about whiskey. And Dad getting a hydrometer. The only way he got it is he wrote that he was a doctor to a guy in California. And that doctor released that prescription that he could have that tool, hydrometer.
We showed that once, right? Because it
Yeah.
reads Dr. Kirchhoff on it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's it. Someday that'll be a souvenir. It won't be long.
It'll be memorabilia.
Jason, what were you talking about? Oh,
Well, I'm trying to
I got one thing I want to tell you about.
Yeah, let's do that.
You asked if I knew anything about whiskey.
I was on an airplane before.
They always talk about the jugs in the corn crib, ear corn. And they poke that. That was our hired man that did that. The hired man was down there in the machine shed dumping that whiskey while Dad was talking to the revenue man up in the yard. But then they scraped up at 2 ounces or 3 ounces, wrung it out, and that's what they charged Dad, $100 an ounce. He always says whiskey's cheap nowadays.
That's a pretty good hired man if he was risking his sort of association with
They were dedicated.
bootlegging.
So,
Yeah.
so can you tell that whole story from
Beginning.
we were out at the farm and the revenuers showed up?
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, but you know it
But I heard the
well
story.
enough to tell, right?
Tell us.
So they were out at the farm.
Oh, at that time they hid it in the ear corn.
So there was a corn crib full of corn, and there would be glass carafes full of whiskey inside.
Yes.
Okay.
And they found that. I imagine they could smell it, really, to be honest with you. But they found it, and they poked it, and then they broke a jug, and it dribbled all down. But they picked up as much as they could, and what they took along to Fort Dodge was 2 ounces or 3. So the decision was, the final, what do you call it?
Verdict?
Verdict was $100 an ounce. No, 30 days and $100 an ounce until fine is paid. And then Dad and Joe Elmer just stood around because that was the first door neighbor that was supposed to bring him back home. And the judge said, "What are you standing around here for?" He said, "Well, I got served 30 days." He says, "No." I said, $100 fine and 30 days until fine is paid. You're
30 days or until fine's paid.
Yeah,
and they paid it
you're
there.
free to go.
And he paid
So
the
he's happy he took off.
You said $100
So-
fine, it was a $300 fine.
So when the revenuers came on the property.
I knew that fining business was up at Fort Dodge.
No, I know, but I want to hear more about the hired man. So your dad, did he give a signal to the hired man to go dump the whiskey?
No. There's a front end of a machine shed and a back end of a machine shed. And the back end was 2 roller doors. You had to roll them over to get out. To store the machinery for the next year.
Yep.
Dad had that on hook so that Joe Daltmeyer could go out that back door and throw them in the cornfield and break them. But he never got away with it. He broke one beforehand.
I see.
and he's supposed to go out the back end of that machine shed.
And your dad at the time was talking to the.
Revenue.
Did he take them somewhere else, like show them
Anything
around?
to stall.
But
Anything to stall.
then they must have found more in the corn crib that time, because they did poke rods in the corn crib around.
Yeah, that's how they broke the jug.
Yeah, and they trickled down.
It'd go down.
So the hired hand actually broke a jug, and then they broke one in the crib.
Yeah, he didn't like that Daltmeyer very good after that.
Was that all the whiskey that was on the farm, or
I
was
do
there
not
some
know.
they never found?
We had whiskey and post-show. That post-show deal must have been about the easiest.
Yeah,
You know, you could disguise it.
right.
But
So-
We're still waiting on finding one of those today.
For what?
Post hole with some whiskey in it from the 1930s. Wouldn't that be great?
probably
I got
one
one
there.
for you. You want a fifth?
I think what's interesting to note is that people say, well, why did they use a fence post? Well, the fence post, you have your farm, and then you have your fence line, then you have what they call the right of way or the ditch. And if it's in the ditch area or in your fence line, they cannot convict you for having that on your property. But you have it on your own property, you know, where you're living, obviously that's in your possession.
Meaning the fence line's part of the ditch, which is like
It's neutral.
county
Yeah,
property.
it's neutral property.
I'm just thinking that the sentences must have been so random if they charged him $100 an ounce and they busted guys with thousands of gallons of whiskey, but they didn't charge them millions of dollars.
I don't think they ever busted anybody with thousands of gallons of whiskey.
he
It was
just
thousands
copied.
of gallons of
He was
mash,
Oh,
which you would distill down to.
and then that wasn't as illegal?
Well, because mash is not alcohol.
No.
Interesting.
But once it ferments, but then it's really just like beer. I don't know.
I'm just thinking judges back then were sort of like, how much is this going to hurt? $300 probably hurt a little bit.
Well, tell that
yeah.
story about your dad.
Yeah, but I don't know. Oh, well, okay.
Wasn't there the story where basically the judge asked him how much money he had in his...
Yes. That's the cute part about it. They asked, the judge was ready to put down the sentence, I guess, and they took a break. But during the break, they called Templeton Bank and asked how much money does Al Kirk have in the checking account. And that's when Louis Schreck really stood up for Al Kirk. He said, "How much do you need?" He said, "We need 300." He had 700 in it. He said, but he gave him 300, and they accepted that. That would have broke him as far as Fort Dodge is concerned.
So the Templeton Bank, or the Carroll banker said, how much, instead of saying he had 700, he said, well, how much do you need? And they said 300, and he said, well, that's what he's got, 300.
Yeah.
But that was actually the Templeton Bank at the time, wasn't it, Dad?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting to note, though, the sheriff was always on the side of the bootlegger. You know, the sheriff helped him out. You know, you heard those stories.
Well, I don't know. There's stories Dad and the blacksmith and them guys used to talk about how they paid him off. They paid the revenue man off. They feel that happened.
I'm sure at some level.
Sure.
Well, I read a book or somewhere that they said that they had like 1,500 revenue agents for the United States, and all but 5% were corrupt. There's only 5% were actually doing the job. So you know there's a little payola.
Wait, you read a book?
I wrote it. I didn't write one. I read
Did you
it.
write?